March of the Machine, Episode 1, Triumph of the Fleshless. It is good to be Phyrexian. It is good to be Elesh Norn. This has always been true, but never more so than now. Three worms, Kaya, Kaito, and Tyvar, the others called them, are before her, begging for mercy. Oh, they don't do it out loud, but Norn sees it. Norn understands. Fear haunts their eyes and their two stiff bodies. Weapons tremble in pale-knuckled hands. How misguided they are. If they submit, she could do away with all their faults, but she knows they'd turn down such a magnanimous offer, such an act of benevolence, there's no point in asking. Just as there is no point in their efforts. All will be won, and it won't be very long now. "Stay with us," she tells them. "Behold the glory of New Phyrexia." "Go to hell," says the smallest. The largest moves towards her, but the others pull him back. Typical. Discord lives within the hearts of non-believers. Even when there are so few, they are never truly united. If only they could see that. A mere flick of Norn's wrist is enough to summon the portals. Everything in this place is keyed to her will. Metal clicks and slides and rearranges around them. 5 irises open on 5 alternate planes. No matter how their skies starred, warm violet, slate gray, or coal black, they now pulsed with red light. Phyrexian symbols blaze among the clouds. It is from these portals that she now watches the invasions. Realmbreakers' massive barb-tipped limbs burst forth, anchoring themselves wherever they please. Rivers of blessed oil run onto the earth. Pods fly from the secured barbs, soaring in all directions, but always in perfect sync. Some birth centurions, some birth golems, and some lie in wait for the lost souls they will soon welcome. To the 3 lost creatures before her, a sunrise is beautiful. Phyrexia knows better. Thousands of mouths, speaking with one voice, thousands of eyes with a single vision, thousands of minds with only one thought. That is beauty. And they've created it in their own multitudinous hands. "Have you ever known such unity?" she asks. The small one opens her maw. Before the words come out, another far more pleasant voice cuts her off. "We've done as you asked." Luca, that is his name, isn't it? One of the human wretches at the sight of him, but to Phyrexia, he's a shining example of the future that awaits them. Oh, so he was rough around the edges, they'd smooth those soon enough. Flesh trembles at its own destruction, it's only natural. Norn turns towards her holy evangels. Jace slips off, he knows what Norn wants, of course. Knows before she has to say a thing. 3 more arrive in lockstep. Luca, Atraxa, and Ajani. Nahiri trails behind, the newest member sent to fetch her fellows. Carried like a trussed-up offering between them is the once powerful Shieldred. Out of her armor, she's pathetic and small, an overgrown newt who once dreamed of praetordom. All of Phyrexia knew she was only a pretender to the title. Now it's finally laid bare. Luca and Ajani present their quarry. Shieldred spits, her black spittle falling well short of its target. Tied as she is, her natural inclination is to try and wriggle free. How satisfying to see her reduced to this. "What shall we do with her?" asks Ajani. His eyes flick to the prisoners. "Or do they need dealing with first?" Norn beholds the little worms, so afraid. Already they're skittering backward. Their plans are as obvious as their terror. Leave New Phyrexia. Tell the others, gather their meager forces and mount a counterattack. So the efforts of the fleshbound often go. Where has all that struggle gotten them? Here in the inner sanctum. Hopelessly outnumbered, they still think there's a way out of this. It's amusing in the way that death is amusing once you've transcended it.
You want to leave, don't you? Phyrexia shall permit it. On one condition,
she says.
Nahiri, restraints.
Stone springs from the ground, encasing the 3 imperfect planeswalkers. Only their heads remain unimpeded. It won't work forever, Norn is well aware. She saw the smallest one phase through solid matter earlier. But it will serve its purpose. And if they spit on her benevolence, then they've earned their fates.
You shall be the prophets of our coming, she says. In time, you shall tell your unbelieving brethren what you have seen. A united future.
What a joke, Shieldred whispers. Speaking strains her chest against its bonds. All of this grandstanding won't change the truth. You're only looking out for yourself, Norn. Phyrexia means nothing to you unless it conforms to your mad ravings. You've never cared about unity. You only care about yourself.
Is that so?
Norn repeats. She slams the arm of her throne.
Elesh Norn's cares are Phyrexia's cares. The argent etchings demanded we spread the glory of new Phyrexia, Shieldred. Long have you tried to rot away our holy teachings from within, but the time for that is since past. Our future is gleaming and perfect, free from your stain. Phyrexia no longer has a place for those who crave power over unity. Ajani, execute her.
For once, Shieldred does more than whisper. Whatever her screaming protest may be, it's lost in the swift descent of the axe. Shieldred's head bounces to a stop at her feet, smearing black ichor across the porcelain floor. Norn pays it only a moment's attention. Her servants will remove the corpse for processing. One mustn't waste perfectly good parts. They will serve Phyrexia as Shieldred could not. Muscle strains against stone as the largest of the prisoners tries to wriggle free. Given enough time, he will. Elesh Norn counts on them escaping. There must be those who spread the gospel, after all, and they cannot do so from here. Once they understand how futile it is to fight the inevitable, they can depart. But once more to the work, once more to the invasion.
Rejoice, blessed evangels,
she begins.
Our symbol blazes across the plains, our sacred words in its shadow. Soon we shall awaken the multiverse from its slumber. The glorious light of completion, of new Phyrexia, is nigh. With the barrier of their skin removed and their minds joined to ours, the others will soon come to know the ecstasy of Phyrexia as you do.
Keening howls ring within the sanctum, carried up from the bowels of new Phyrexia. How beautifully they sing that which cannot be put into words. The evangels try to join their voices to the masses, but they are new, their throats too delicate. A lackluster addition. A choir is only a choir if each voice works in harmony with the others. The dissonance they cause is grating and disappointing.
Quiet upon the congregation,
she screams. And lo, there is quiet.
Our work is not yet done. We stand before the untarnished glory of eternal completion. We need only take our final steps towards it. For your zealous services and devotion, we have decided to grant you the honor of uniting your homelands. Tell us, Nahiri, where is it you were born?
The core has too much flesh by far, but they made do with what they could, given the time. Zendikar, she says. Many lifetimes ago, I was born in Zendikar. Norn nods.
Nissa, she calls. Show us this place.
Nissa is the finest gift the Planeswalkers have given Phyrexia. Even standing at Norn's side, she can steer Realmbreaker's attention, to say nothing of her combat abilities. If things continued at this rate, she might overtake Tamiyo as Norn's new favorite servant. But there's time yet to see, and, in truth, all serve Phyrexia in their way. The portals shift, joining together into a long oval. Disparate images ripple and reform into something new, something whole, something complete. Before them, an ancient forest, the trees thick as towers. What little can be seen of the sky is as verdant as the canopies overhead. Elves moving among the branches like ants in a hive, each armed, each looking up, each waiting for something. They did not realize how soon it will find them. The branches they stride along bend into Phyrexian shapes, holes within trees and stone heralds the shapes their bodies will take. Norn's portal is far from the only one. Phyrexia's 1,000 eyes stare down upon them as they stare up. Nahiri snarls at Nissa. The Mother of Machines cares not for these trifles. Show her one of the Skyclaves. Again, the image ripples. This time the canopy of trees frames a view of a floating city. Hedrons surround it like the feathers of a withdrawn bird. Stark white against the sky, its edges harsh and precise. Norn finds it immediately beautiful. Perhaps the shorter-lived could make something useful after all. You have plans for this? Norn asks. Nahiri nods. Yes, Grand Praetor. This is a relic of my people, an ancient weapon we once used to dominate the plane. I can wake it once more to enact our will. A smirk curls Norn's lips. You wear your new purpose as well as you wear your raiment. Go to this place. Our forces will meet you there. Nahiri needs no further instruction. In 3 steps, she winks out of existence, the sanctum resounding with a boom. Norn glances towards the prisoners once more. Gone already, they must have timed their departure with Nahiri's to conceal the sound. What pitiful creatures to turn away from such beauty. Luca, how will you bring the glory of Phyrexia to your home? Sheoldred's blood still stains his face and carapace. Oh, Reverend Mother, I will bring it to heal. Specifically, Luca, she says. That you will bring it to heal is a given. A grunt leaves him. He shifts his weight side to side. The monsters, he offers at last. Once they've joined the fold, the others will cower before us. She does not like this answer. It implies that the humans don't already cower before them. Neither does she like the simmering anger beneath the surface. Anger which lends itself to missteps. Bloodlust is all well and good, but in a brute, in a lieutenant? The Planeswalkers would exploit it, lay a trap for him that he couldn't ignore. Faced with staying to ensure the completion of the plan or bolting off to settle a personal grievance, Luca would always choose the personal grievance. Very well, she says. Go to Ikoria. Add these monsters to our ranks. But do understand what the price of failure is, Luca, and don't forget your true home. You have been anointed with the sacred oil of New Phyrexia. You are no longer a creature of base instinct. You belong to a greater whole. And ever it may rain, he says. His departure is swift as Nahiri's, and its effect as palpable. Norn allows herself to wonder how much more quickly all this might have come together if Phyrexia had the same ability. No, it is good Phyrexia had to carve its victory from the spine of an uncaring plane, Anything less would have left them unsuited for the job. "Grand Praetor," says Tamio. Norn is shaken from her thoughts.
"Yes?"
"He will most certainly die on Ikoria," she says. "A bull-headed man often makes mistakes with hasty decisions. I imagine you intend for it to go that way?"
"If he fails, he goes the way of Sheoldred, and one of you rains judgment on him,"
Norn answers.
"If he succeeds, the plane is ours, and he will serve penance for any mistakes to our satisfaction. Either way, Phyrexia is served."
Tamio nods.
"As I thought, you are as well-reasoned as ever." "The Grand Cenobite does not make mistakes,"
says Atraxa. The others are unaccustomed to her voice. They find it harsh and painful, a shard of glass to their delicate eardrums. Even Ajani flinches. Norn does not.
"Indeed, Tamio. Was it Kamigawa you called home?"
"Once, before I came to understand the truth of these things," she says.
"Nissa!"
Norn commands. The single word is all it takes. Once more the portals ripple and shift. The plane that greets them shines beneath a night sky. Artificial lights illuminate a glittering city. The view swings closer, as if on the end of an arrow, and soon they are within the city itself. Tiered structures looming near the shore, reaching for the dark above. These people walking the streets are soft and pliable. It strikes her that no one is panicking. Perhaps they've realized that completion is nothing to fear, but it is more likely that they do not know it is coming, in spite of the portals overhead. Here, in the moments before the barbs make anchor, these people go about their pointless lives. A man ingesting some sort of food, he speaks to another person situated at a small stand, offering more of the same, asking him a question whose answer will soon be irrelevant. A woman walking with two of her offspring. They are begging for an extra helping of the candy in her hand. She tears off a piece for each, leaving herself without, a sacrifice no one will remember in light of what's about to happen. Tamia watches too. Her grip tightens around an iron-bound scroll. Among the Evangels, she is the only one not covered in blood.
"Did you love Kamigawa?"
Norn asks.
"I did,"
Tamio says.
"A land of heroes and scoundrels, betrayers and champions. It seemed there were 1,000 possibilities for how life might change in the future. I wanted to see them all, and I wanted to discover with my family which one was true. Now I love what it will become." "Your family,"
Norn repeats. Ajani crosses his arms, listening intently, knowing there will be questions for him too.
"Do you still care for your family?"
Tamio watches the woman and her offspring as they walk down the street. Overhead, the first slivers of white come into view. The woman continues. She swings the hands of her children, or they swing hers. Then, as if remembering that she was asked a question, she turns.
"I want them to understand what I've come to know about the world, about unity. If we are all completed, then we need never be apart again," she says. "You understand,"
Norn says.
"Our family is greater than any you've ever known. Welcome the old into the new with open arms, Tamio."
There is no true silence in the beating metal heart of Phyrexia. Metal slides on metal as its denizens go about their great, holy work. Pistons animate, beginnings beyond human understanding. Blades cut away that which is impure. Here, too, they can still hear the distant sounds of Shieldred's final contributions. The crack of chitin, the tear of sinew. Yet, the silence that follows Norn's words is there all the same. Tamio watches the screen and makes no sign that she's heard Norn's blessed commands. Realmbreaker pierces the earth. Tiered buildings shutter and shed their layers. Whole floors tumble away. All around, the tiles are falling like jagged porcelain snow. In only an instant, the small food stand is crushed. Red spills from beneath, joining the babbling water. The mother picks up her children, one in the crook of each arm, and runs. "Tamio!" Norn repeats. This hesitation sticks between Norn's pointed teeth. A man in black streaks across their view. In a storm of brilliant cuts, the falling tiles are split, directed away from the family. They see no more of what happens. Atraxa takes flight, blocking the view with her wings. When she speaks, her voice is sharper than a sword, sharper than the unseen knives at work not far away. "Insolence isn't tolerated here. You were given a command." Tamio starts. Ajani flinches. She turns, blinking. I'm sorry. I have no idea what came over me." "See that whatever it is, you eradicate it," Norn says. "There can be no space for it. Return with Kamigawa. Under your control, or be recycled into something that serves it better." "As you wish," she says. The sense must have gotten back into her. She no longer hesitates in leaving, and does not look up once towards the display. There are only 4 of them in the room once Tamio has gone. Nissa standing at her side, her eyes clouded with green. Ajani, who watched Tamio go, waits for his next set of orders. Atraxa remains airborne. With every flap of her wings, her anticipation is palpable. But patience is a valuable lesson to learn. "Ajani," she says, and he inclines his head. "What am I going to ask you?"
"To show you the place where I was born,"
he answers.
"No, your destiny is greater than that. We believe you know where it lies."
It is not silence that comes between them, then, but understanding. When he turns towards the mirrors, it is with confidence.
"You want to see Theros?"
"Quite right." Black covers the surface of the mirrors. Black shines bright. Black reflects something new. A city stares back at them, one unlike the last. Wine-red waves lap at the golden shores. White houses dot a verdant countryside. Where Kamigawa was swathed in the night, this place is brilliant under the light of the sun. Ships sail beneath the outstretched swords of the 2 guardian statues. On their decks, fishers wonder why their catches have contorted into strange shapes. On the cliff sides, astronomers debate the meaning of the portal's appearance. It is as peaceful a view as anyone might imagine, if they do not look too closely. Norn's heart brims with excitement. They are so close to perfection, so close to a deeper understanding, and she knows it will not be long. Theros is among the first wave of targets, and it seems they're going to get a good view of the festivities. It starts the same as it did on Kamigawa. Great white branches bursting from the portals. No tree can be seen here, but the roots find purchase all the same. Pods deploy before the tree has finished its work. So eager is Phyrexia to lay claim to this place. Some burst midair, giving birth to a swarm of insectoid convertors. The wind carries the storm of blades to the market. Metal glints in the skies above, hunks of white porcelain dropping to the earth. Hulks cratering the buildings they land upon. Marble crumbles like sand, black oil streaks across the white. Temples bolt their doors only for the war machines of Phyrexia to batter them down. Winged constructs devour livestock and humans alike, some descending onto the ships to find their meals. Nets do little to stop them. Spears bounce off their proud carapaces. Phyrexia is hungry. Elish Norn is hungry. Every clamp of their jaws brings the taste of blood to her tongue, an offering from the chorus to her. She is with them, and they are with her. Soon this place will be one.
It seems our forces are doing well without me,
Ajani says.
At slaughtering the weak and capturing the useful, Norn says, they will be far more efficient once you are there to lead them.
You wouldn't be sending me there for such trivial reasons.
He has seen more than he should have then. Commanders are best when they're clever, but also at their most dangerous. To be clever is to be individual. And within Phyrexia, all are one. Elish Norn will have reminded him of this, possibly with new modifications.
Theros is important to the future of New Phyrexia.
As if to help deter further questions, the battle on the other side of the portal escalates. Nissa's shifted the view to that of someone standing on the shore. Partially submerged in the water is a temple. Atop that temple, there is a hand, swathed in the shining black night of the sky, dripping rivers onto its steps. Only when their unseen observer looks up does the full picture become clear. There is something guarding the place. Part woman and part something else. Strangest and most tantalizing is the way parts of her fade in and out of existence. A creature of that size could conquer whole plains on her own when completed. Still, if size was the only thing that interested Phyrexia, Norn would have sent someone more trustworthy to Ikoria. No, whatever this thing is, it is more than just something huge. It is something Elish Norn wants.
That, she says, pointing with one porcelain finger. You are to bring that within Phyrexia's embrace.
Ajani studies the creature. Nodding once, he looks to Norn. There's something like a smile on his muzzle as the plan becomes apparent to him.
Ah, now I understand. It's the gods you're after.
That's one of their gods? Norn expected more of deities. Not that there are any in existence who could hope to challenge Phyrexia now that it's taken its proper place. Well, this creature is majestic in a way. It's far from pure. Already, Elish Norn's mind races at the possibilities.
Bring priests with you, she says. Bring the Argent etchings. We will defeat these gods on every possible battleground. And for those wise enough to realize the truth of the multiverse, lend to them the power to enlighten their former friends.
The etchings will make it easy. It's belief that makes gods on Theros, not the other way around, he says. Once the people understand the truth, the gods will follow.
He looks once more over his shoulder. The creature, the god, has driven a Bident through one of their attack ships. On the shore, what sailors remain throw their arms around one another in celebration. Wide smiles break out across their faces, made strange by the fear that clings to their eyes. Deep down, they know it will not be enough, and this brings Norn an untold, ineffable joy. "Go!" she commands. He does. Ajani, ever loyal, does as he's told. As he winks out of existence, she allows herself a moment of pride in this recruitment and creation. And pride, too, that he did not discover the real reason she'd sent him to Theros. That's fine enough. Even ignorant of his goal, he'd accomplish it. Only Atraxa and Nissa remained in the sanctum with her. "Mother of machines, highest and holiest of authorities, I live to serve," Atraxa offers. "You needn't waste your time on such inefficiencies," Norn says. "You're well aware there's a reason your task has come last." A slight flinch at the reprisal, visible only to the woman who shaped Atraxa's body with her own 2 hands. The others could lay claim to whatever parts they wish, but Norn knew Atraxa best, and Norn had her heart. Nothing remained of her former life, save for that which made her perfect. "Whatever New Phyrexia asks of me shall be done." "Nissa, our missionaries once went around on a place called Capenna. Show us what's become of it." It takes longer for the vision before them to change. Frustrating, but not unexpected. This isn't a place Nissa knows well. When at last the view comes into focus, they are staring at a golden gate surrounded by white marble. Inscriptions surround the rim. Norn can't read the language and has no care to. Not that she could, even if she'd been familiar with it to start. A shimmering golden haze renders all the fine details fuzzy. Atraxa says nothing, but she does look up toward Norn, how like a vat-slick, freshly born newt. "Our predecessors found this plane by ancient means," she says. "Though it was thick with a holy stench, they saw within it something valuable, something worth the risk its guardians presented. For the better part of a year they lingered, taking whatever they wished, conducting vital research on the populace, spreading blessed corruption wherever they tread, until something sealed them away," Atraxa offers. Good, she's beginning to understand why she was chosen for this. "Indeed, angels, false prophets bound to stone for their insolence," Norn says. These words must have weight for Atraxa. She let them ring before continuing. "Fearing that the truth we would bring to their people, a unity the likes of which they could never promise, they grew desperate. They gave up their physical forms to suppress our ship's influence. For years we have been there, and for years we've not accomplished a thing. That ends now." "It will be done," says Atraxa. "I will free the ship." "The ship is of no concern to us. Had they been faithful, they would have triumphed. If you do uncover it or its crew, you are to scavenge them for parts. Completion is a gift they no longer deserve." "As you wish," says Atraxa. "Nissa, show us the atrocity they've constructed." The view shifts to another nighttime sky, and to the city glittering beneath it. No, Norn refuses to think of it as a city. The towering needle reaching for the stars is an affront in every way. Even without a haze of gold, it would reek of decadence, Everywhere the eye falls, there is something to appall it. Golden shells mounted to vertical shuttles, a sickening worship of fur evident in their coats and dresses, the foul noise they call music, played by the unworthy tubes of flesh. Its height is hubris, and hubris is its height. All of this constructed on Phyrexian bodies. All of this to keep them away. Burn this into your memory. Never forget what they've done to us. Never forget what they've constructed here. The faithless consider themselves divine, Atraxa, but divinity exists only in unity. All must be as one, Atraxa echoes. From her grip on her weapon, she has little love for the view. What is it you wish me to do? Teach these people the price of their insolence. They could have joined our ranks once, but they will no longer find such mercy from us. You will harvest them all. It will be done, Atraxa says. With a flap from her wings, she approaches the bridge to the tree, but Norn raises a hand to stop her. There is one other task for you, Elish Norn says. Atraxa waits in midair. Norn points. The angels that lent this place their protection still guard it today, albeit in a new way. The haze we see here is what remains of their ethereal forms. The faithless call it halo, and it will be anathema to you. Until you bring the tower down and wake the angels from their rest, you will be unable to escape its influence. Your most sacred duty on the plane is to find its wellspring and destroy it. Atraxa's chin dips lower. She looks to the mirrors, then to Norn. Mother of machines, it is not my place to question you. Indeed, it isn't, Norn says. But your question will be permitted. Speak it. Whatever the question may be, Norn will answer. Atraxa is already bound to the will of New Phyrexia. Ultimately, it makes no matter what Norn's answer is, as long as there is one. If the ship has been lost for untold years, and the atmosphere is poisonous, why not leave this place to the Centurions? Why am I being given this task? The reasons are threefold. First, it is a glorious task, and completing it announces your worth to all. Second, your previous life may lend you some protection to this halo. There are no true silences within the sanctum, but there is something like it as Atraxa waits for the third item, and Norn thinks of how to phrase it. Third, there exists a danger to New Phyrexia. In killing New Capenna, we strike at its heart. Atraxa's wings flap once. This danger, is that why you sent a Johnny to Theros as well? Astute of you, Norn says. Yes, this danger cannot be permitted to triumph. You and Johnny will seal our victory. Then all is for the glory of the faithful, Atraxa says. She leaves then. Only Nissa remains, yet she is cold company. Norn's lieutenant is too preoccupied with managing the tree's growth to speak to her. The air is not quite silent in the sanctum. Norn hates it. With a gesture, she calls for her attendants. They arrive to recite her own thoughts and teachings to her. In their screeching voices, Elish Norn forgets her nightmares, and the woman who stalks them, clad in white. March of the Machine, Episode 2, Holding Your Breath. Chandra hates waiting. She hates everything about this. The safe house they're all cooped up inside, the daily check-ins from other walkers, waiting to hear the worst. the excruciating agony of knowing a blow is coming, but not knowing when or where it will strike. For the past week, they haven't been living in any real sense of the word. They've been waiting. That's the plan, after all. For 2 weeks, they'll wait here in one of Liliana's cabins on Dominaria. Though she swore these were simple placeholders for the soon-to-be reconstructed Vess Manor, they were crawling with the sort of wards that would make a demon think twice. Chandra had no idea Liliana even knew so many wards. When pressed, Liliana simply said she'd learned to protect her investments. At the end of these 2 weeks, if they've not gotten any word, then they're to assume everyone's died and they'll proceed accordingly. If they get news before then, well, they'll act according to the news. If it's good, they'll spread the word to the others that there's nothing to worry about. And if it isn't good, they'll tell the others to get ready for war. Some take the waiting better than others, better than she does. Vivian's out more often than she's in, which gives everyone a little bit of breathing room. Her cooking's incredible, too. Ren's also usually out, but never too far away. Waiting's fine for her, so she claims, but Chandra knows she's getting listless. Ren might be a dryad, but there's a fire within her too. And fire's always hungry for more. And then there's Liliana, who hates waiting as much as Chandra does. They don't really talk about it, because talking about it is like tearing open a wound, but it's something they've sensed about each other. When Chandra returns in the afternoons after her talks with Ren, Liliana's often got a story ready for her. Sometimes it's quiet company. She'll sit there reading some ancient tome or reviewing plans for the renovation while Chandra waits. How can she even focus on something like that right now? Everyone's trying to be normal, but nothing's normal, and no one wants to talk about it. She never asks if there's any news, and if someone arrives asking to hear some, it's usually Liliana who answers, sparing Chandra the trouble. But every day it feels worse. It's like there's a knife against her skin, and every day someone drags it a little further along. Every drop of blood is a thing she hasn't spoken out loud, a thought she's too afraid to think. Phyrexian weaponry, black oil, Ajani and Tamio, lost to them forever, so different from the people they'd have been only a few months ago. A plane full of people like that, people who'd do that to others. Maybe it's wrong to think of them as people at all. She wants to strike back, at least if she was in the thick of it, she'd know what was going on, even if the answers weren't good. Lately, none of the answers have been good. If Nissa was... more than anything, she wants the waiting to be over. For now, she'll pass the time with Ren. You have to focus on your breathing. Fire needs air just like we do, Chandra says. Jaya used to tell her that to calm her down when things got bad. If she could control her breathing, then she could control her fire, and if she controlled her fire, everything would be alright. Jaya's dead. Ajani killed her, and Chandra's not sure if anything's going to be alright again. But she has to hope that it will be. Ren's not great at breathing. Chandra doesn't hold it against her. She's a dryad, after all. Most of them don't have lungs. Comparisons to human breathing are a little hard to grasp, Ren says. Flames look up between her barky skin. In spite of the pain she must be in, she sounds cheerful. Right, Chandra says. She scratches the back of her head. Nissa spoke tree. She probably had tons of dryad friends even. She'd know what to say. But she isn't here. Think of it like the fire's something you have to shape. You've got to find the parts of it that aren't helpful and cut them off. Better, Ren says. The fire does flicker, but it doesn't retreat as much as Chandra wanted. She sets a hand on Ren's shoulder, feeling like it's a thing a mentor should do, but without much of an idea how to mentor. Jaya left her with so many lessons. Chandra's not sure she internalized all of them. How can she pass all of that on to Ren? Somebody else would be better at this. Someone older. Someone like a Johnny. Chandra extinguishes the thought. Let's do it together, she says. I'll be right there with you. Some fires aren't worth the air. The trick is knowing which ones.
All right, says Ren. Although that seems terribly rude to the fire.
Chandra closes her eyes. She takes a breath. In the back of her mind, she can hear Jaya's steady voice, telling her to focus on the feeling of the air through her nostrils. She repeats the words, clumsy and inelegant as they come to her. You have to talk to the fire. Find out what it wants to do. And then the brash war horn boom of Tyvar's arrival falls like an axe between them. The two of them look over towards the safe house in time to see two figures limp through the door. Chandra's breath stops in her throat. There are no more words between her and Ren. There's no need for them. Chandra makes for the safe house, shooting a flare into the murky gray sky and hoping it'll be enough to catch Vivian's attention. And for all that she hates waiting, Chandra finds herself hesitating at the threshold. Only 3 of them came back. Maybe the first 3, maybe not, but which 3 would they be? She runs through the possibilities in her head, and she hates herself for doing it. News is good to have, whatever it might be, but who waited beyond the door? She's never going to find out if she stays out here. Chandra takes a breath. She steps into the safe house with her eyes closed. We were right about the tree. They have their own. It's corrupted, twisted. They outplanned us. They had an answer for everything, shaping reality to whatever they want. 3 voices, none Nissas. Another cut. Chandra swallows. There's other stuff to think about. This plan's bigger than any of them as individuals. Kato, mostly whole, leans against a bust. Kaya and Tyvar are slumped on a couch when she opens her eyes, both covered in blood and dirt and grease. Liliana, of all people, is attending to the injured. There are small vials of liquid laid out before her on the floor. She pours some onto a cloth before dabbing it against one of Tyvar's wounds. It's Liliana who notices Chandra walking in. It isn't good news. It didn't feel like it was, Chandra said.
I've never seen anything fouler,
Tyvar says. A haunted look comes over him.
The world tree essence they stole from Kaldheim, they used it to make monstrosity. It isn't even alive.
They're using it to invade other planes. Kaya can't stand sitting anymore. She's up and pacing, moving whole armies, weapons like we've never seen before. There's almost no one left on New Phyrexia, but those nightmare machines. Soon they're going to be everywhere. We've still got people to fight back, don't we? We can get everyone else from the other planes, round them up, crash back to New Phyrexia, and take Norn down. Chandra's babbling, and she knows it, but she can't stop. Air, she thinks. Air, just keep breathing. All of this is worth the air. This isn't over. It can't be. There's sympathy in Kaya's eyes. No, we can't. Maybe we should wait for Vivian before we go into it, Kaito cuts in. Chandra doesn't like that at all. We've done enough of that. How are they controlling it? I'm just saying, Kaya starts, as gentle as she can be. Kaya, please, Chandra says. It surprises her how pained she sounds. Tell me what happened. Kaya swallows. They got Nissa. And just like that, Chandra forgets how to breathe. She sputters. She knew. On some level she knew. When Nissa wasn't with the group, that before she can summon something to say, the doors open behind them. There's news, Vivian says from behind them. Wait, where's Jace? Fashionably late, I imagine, Liliana says. She ties off the bandage around Tyvar's chest. He'll be here any moment now. Kaya closes her eyes. No, he won't. Liliana's face, at least, shows no signs of distress. Her voice comes sharp and hurt. The same hurt in Chandra's chest. Don't be ridiculous.
He fought valiantly, but these beasts, says Tyvar.
Bravery doesn't matter much when your opponent never tires, never errs, Kaito says. He can't seem to look up from the floor. Or when you're that far gone. It doesn't make any sense, Liliana says. She stands up, picking a tray of vials to hide her trembling hands. All of this nonsense was his idea. He wouldn't just fail. He doesn't do that. At the end, I don't think it was him anymore. He became one of them, Kaito says. Liliana's taking deeper breaths, but she doesn't want anyone to notice. What do you mean? We don't have time to get caught up in the details, Vivian interjects. Whatever happens, Nahir is going to Zendikar. The Wanderer must have gotten away. Elspeth must already have gone to Thera. We saw the Phyrexians take Nahiri too, Tyvar says. Elspeth didn't make it, Kaito adds. The Wanderer's probably headed back home, but there's no way Elspeth made it out of that. There's no way Elspeth Tyrell died on New Phyrexia, says Vivian. Kaya's brows knit together. Her eyes flick over to Liliana. Let's just get this out of the way. The last time we saw Elspeth, her sword was jutting out of Jace's back. She pinches the bridge of her nose before continuing. That messed up tree was already connected to a dozen planes at least. If he set off the Silex, we could have lost them all. The thing was ticking away to the end of days, and there wasn't any time, so Kaya trails off. Tyvar picks up again. Elspeth ran him through, picked up the Silex, and planeswalked into the blind eternities. A noble sacrifice. She must be feasting with the Valkyries now. Oh, shut up, hisses Liliana. The air in the safe room's gone cold. Jace and Nissa are both gone. Nahiri too. Even Elspeth couldn't make it out in the end. Out of everyone they sent, only 4 returned. Only 3 of the 4 are here. Everything they feared is coming true. The Phyrexian invasion is underway. Vivian settles onto the floor with them, having lost her proud bearing in face of the news. This is worse than I thought. That's the only reason we're here. You need to understand what we're up against, Kaya says. The whole multiverse has to understand. Now, as I was saying, well, you can keep going without me. It's a sudden interjection, and with an odd amount of force meant to detract from the wavering of its speaker. Liliana is already making for the door. I'm going to send word to Strixhaven. You should hear the story, starts Tyvar, but Liliana is already shaking her head. I've got a good enough idea of your kind of storytelling. Noble sacrifices never sit well with me. Chandra opens her hand, then closes it into a fist. What if there's a way we can help the others? Chandra's heard people say Liliana's all sharp edges and ambition. That's true, but it's also true that at certain angles, those give way. The tilt of Liliana's head now is anything but sharp. The ambition in her eyes has changed to a deep sympathy. You want to go back there yourself, don't you? All eyes fall on Chandra. She's keenly aware of the way they're looking at her, what they must be thinking. Of course she does, she's impulsive. Chandra can hear the lectures starting, and she's already tired of them. She's tired of sitting around and waiting for the world to end. Yeah, I do, she says. There must be some other way to take the world tree down. You're all acting like it's over. Kaya presses the heel of her palm against her eyes. She takes a deep breath. I can't let you go back. Let me, Chandra says. She takes a step towards her. You aren't letting me do anything. The plan is to let the others know what's going on, Vivian says. She's cooler, more collected, but there's no mistaking what she thinks of Chandra's idea. We can rally our forces, figure out some way to fight back, but we can't do that if we rush in headlong. There's plenty of you to go do that, Chandra argues. Plenty of all of us. But if we keep fighting back against what's already there, we aren't making any progress. We have to cut them off at the root, or they're going to keep coming. The others exchange looks. At least they're thinking about it. Liliana, for all her earlier protestation, hasn't left yet. She remains halfway between Chandra and the door. She understands, doesn't she? She must understand, better than anyone, what this feels like. It's Kaya who speaks up next. Chandra, I understand where you're coming from. Truly I do. But you can't begin to understand what happened in New Phyrexia. This isn't something you can just blow in and solve without planning. We planned for it, and we barely made it out. I've been an assassin for years, and I almost lost my head in there. Nahiri dealt with Eldrazi. We lost her too. If you go there, you aren't just going to die. You're going to have your flesh stripped off, your bones shaped into metal, and your mind warped to their sick worldview. Next time we see you, you'll be telling us about the joys of being one with Phyrexia. Vivian's right. The best thing we can do is try to avoid losing anyone else. Once we're done here, you must return home to Kaladesh and tell people how to prepare. That's the best we can do for them. The answer is coming out of Chandra's mouth before her mind has a chance to stop it. You're treating me like a kid. I'm not treating you like a kid. I'm trying to look out for you. This isn't like Ravnica. The Eternals are nothing compared to Norn's fleshless legions. I know this is coming from a good place. You just want to help everyone. You just want to save the multiverse. Fine. But there are better ways to do it than running it off half-cocked into a job a whole team of us couldn't finish. Kaya's saying things, but all Chandra can hear is more of the same. Kaya doesn't see the point. Tyvar has to understand, right? He loves big challenges, but when she catches his eye, he averts his gaze.
Valor's commendable,
echoes Tyvar.
but so is knowing which battles are yours to fight. Kaya and I are only here to tell you what's happened. Go where you're needed, tend to your own, and die where your bones are home.
This is everyone's battle, Chandra says. Which means everyone gets a say in it, says Vivian. And my say is that we don't waste any more time or resources on something we know isn't going to work. I know how you're feeling. Admitting you've lost isn't easy, Kaido says. But we only lost the fight. If we can keep our homes safe, we win the war. Chandra takes a breath. She feels like she's going to explode. This is the most obvious thing in the world, and they either can't or won't see it. What about the people stuck on New Phyrexia? Are we just going to leave them there? No one wants to answer it. Not directly. The silence that comes over the safe house is then nothing but another form of waiting, and Chandra hates it as much as she hates this whole situation. If she could burn everything down right now, if she could find a new start in the flames, then she would. Standing here is making her soul itch. Tell me, are we abandoning them? Breathing's getting harder to do, or easier. The breaths are big and sharp now, feeding the fire growing in the pit of her stomach. Heat sears the corner of her eyes. Chandra? Liliana says, soft as shadow on snow. She'd want you to stay safe, wouldn't she? Why'd she have to say that? Chandra's been trying so hard not to think about it, trying to keep her imagination at bay, but Liliana's cut it loose. It's easy to imagine Nissa here as it is to call fire. Chandra can see it so clearly, the determination written on Nissa's face, her eyes gone canopy green, the angle of her ears. She can feel Nissa's hand on her shoulder, she can smell moss and pine, she can hear the words even if she doesn't want to imagine them. It hurts. God, it hurts. She feels like she's bleeding out in front of every single one of them, and not a one is offering her any help at all. Chandra takes another breath. Air, she thinks. Just keep breathing. When we lose someone, we have to do honor to their memory, Liliana says. I haven't lost her, Chandra fires back. Kaya's exasperation increases by the second. She's exhausted, and it's in every line of her face. She's gone, Chandra. No, she isn't. If we stop the Phyrexians, we can figure out how to stop whatever happened, how to make it better. You can't give up on... This is about more than any one person, Vivian cuts in. We're tending to a forest here, not a single tree. Don't you think I know that? She says. The faint glow at the edge of her vision tells her she's flaring up. She didn't intend to, but it's fine, maybe even good. All this feeling has to go somewhere. Don't you think I know how many lives are on the line? That's why I want to go back. We're never going to win if all we do is run away from them. Chandra? Starts Kaya, but it's too late. She's beyond listening now. I'm leaving, she says. You can go and warn other planes if you want to, but I'm not leaving our friends behind.
You're going alone? Tyvar asks.
Since none of you are coming, yeah, I'm going alone, she says, backing towards the door. But I won't be alone when I get there.
And what's your plan exactly? Kaido calls. Chandra doesn't turn.
Take down the tree. Figure everything else out along the way. Nice and easy.
The marsh awaits, with Liliana as the last of the group standing in her way.
Still, Liliana isn't quite blocking her, only leaning against the threshold, watching.
You're serious about this, she says. Yeah, and you're serious about running away, aren't you?
There are plenty of people who would kill for the chance to make Liliana Vess wince. Strangely, it doesn't feel like a victory to Chandra. None of this does, and that's the worst part.
Is that what you think I'm doing? I'm not running. I just know funeral bells when I hear them. I wish you all the best on your little adventure.
Wait, Chandra says, but Liliana doesn't. She walks out onto the marsh herself, hardly casting a backward glance.
Oh, there's no time for waiting. You said so yourself.
Nothing about today is easy. Chandra opens and closes her hand again. She wants to argue, or to make it clear what she really meant, that Liliana would be a huge help if she came, and that maybe they could find some answers together, and maybe it's good to face your fears instead of running from them. But that'd be asking Liliana to be someone other than herself. And the two of them had always understood not to ask that of each other. Liliana disappears in a blink of inky vapor. Chandra Nilar gets to walking. The tears are hot when they leave her eyes, but the cold air of the marsh threatens to freeze them against her skin. She turns up the heat to keep from shivering. She doesn't know how far she wants to go before she planeswalks away. Really, she doesn't have to go far at all. She could do it here if she wanted to. But she wants to walk for a while. Feel the wind. Smell the awful marsh smell. Look up at the dull gray sky. When she leaves, she may not see sky again for some time. It isn't the vibrant azure of Kaladesh. The clouds here don't spiral. In fact, there aren't any clouds at all, only a morass of gray in all directions. She can't smell ozone or stall food. She can't hear the din of the markets. This place is not home. This place is not what she will remember. That's fine. She'll come back. There will be other places. She'll make sure of it. Because when the world tree comes down, they're going to have so many other places to go. It'll be fine. After. She stops at the first tree she sees. It isn't a very strong tree, or even very healthy. Its bark has gone black, its branches empty and gnarled like claws raking against the sky. But it is a tree, and she thinks that's probably good enough for taking a breath. Chandra sits beneath its non-existent shade and throws her head back. Going to New Phyrexia is the right thing to do. But she's afraid. It'll be fine. She just needs a second to build up to it. And maybe a second to cry before she planeswalks right into the mouth of an evil empire, defended by the people who were once her closest friends. People she depended on to take that empire down. They couldn't do it, and now she's going off to do it alone. A sudden coolness and the shifting of the leaves tells her she's not alone. Sniffling, Chandra frowns.
Go away! Oh, I'd rather not. Then I'd have to return to the others.
Ah, it's Ren. At least it isn't Kaya trying to talk her out of this. Still, Chandra can't think of anything to say. She tries not to sob now that she's got company, but she sobs all the same.
I want to help.
Chandra wipes at the tip of her nose. You do?
I do. How strange it was to watch you speak with the others. I thought you were making perfect sense. If a branch has gone rotten, you've got to cut it off before you can assess how the tree's doing.
She didn't know what a relief it would be to have someone understand her. Before, it felt like her anger was steaming out of her, but it's different now, like it's melting out into the ground. Still, she has to be sure that Ren means what she's saying. We won't have any backup.
Don't speak so surely, Ren says. We have 7 with us, and I think we'll have Teferi too.
Teferi? But no one knew where he was, or if he was even still alive.
You're confused about that, aren't you? I think that's confusion on your face. It can be hard to tell sometimes what people are thinking just with their faces.
You guessed right, Chandra says. You should give yourself more credit. If we had Teferi with us, you think you know where to find him? I think so, Ren says. She nods, while Seven assumes a thinking posture. He's gotten himself caught in a tangle again. But it's nothing we can't solve. I've been studying it while we've been in this place, the twisting paths he's gone down. I know how to reach him, but I won't be able to do it on my own. Well, you won't be on your own, Chandra says. The fear's leaving, too, as the hope begins to rear its head. If she can get to ferry out from wherever he is, their odds improve considerably. You'll have me, Seven, and we'll have whoever else we find out there. But Ren looks away, her hand resting on Seven's bark. Seven has done so much for me, but he cannot do this. He cannot lend me power he doesn't have. It must be the fire, and it must be the world tree. The most important thing about dealing with fire, Jaya had always said, is to know that it's dealing with you. You can guide it, you can make suggestions, you can give it a safe place to be, but in the end, it's always going to do what it wants. And what it wants changes from second to second. You have to be in conversation with it if you mean to get anywhere. And if you want to keep your friends safe, it's the exact opposite of dealing with trees. Chandra used to talk with Nissa about it too. Nissa used to tell her that sometimes turbulent growth, the sort that happened all at once, could be like fire. At first, Chandra hadn't believed her. Fire scours, nature nurtures. But then she saw what the royal was like on Zendikar, and it started to make sense. Sometimes it was the same. She liked it when nature surprised her, and more than anything, she liked listening to Nissa talk about it. She'd try to help Ren figure things out the way Nissa had helped her, but teaching's a lot harder than listening, and Ren's fire isn't any normal flame. That she's standing there at all is a testament to her strength. If she's really going to set it loose, then the world tree might just be the only thing that can handle it. You're sure? I am, she says. The others were wrong. That tree is alive. I can hear his song from here. It's distant, but pained. A howl without melody. He needs help, just as Teferi and the others do. If I were to ignore it, what sort of hero would I be? My own fright has little to do with it. Chandra offers a small, sad smile. Hero, huh? I'm frightened too, but less now that I've got company. You should find yourself a friend like Seven, Ren says. You'll never be lonely then. Unless that friend should happen to be lost on a plane full of vicious enemies, then she'd be very lonely indeed. Chandra's smile only gets sadder, but she stretches it out as if to hide it. She gives Seven a pat on the bark. Let's head out. Ren tilts her head, as if realizing she might have said something amiss, but the moment passes without comment. Soon they have left the shade of the barren tree. No one comes to see them off. Not anyone they can see, at any rate. But there is someone watching the clearing. There is someone watching the safe house, and the people within it huddled together in search of purpose and direction. A trick of the light might reveal them, or it might not. A keen nose might notice their scent, or it might not. But they are there, watching. All of this feels familiar to them, like a song whose lyrics have long since faded away. Over and over they try to remember, and yet the words flit away. Only the melody remains, a lament for what is to come, a dolorous anthem. The watcher is not alone. There are others too, seeing and yet unseen. The watcher asks one of them, "What is it we're seeing? Why are we here?" The answer comes like the trumpet of war horns. "We are here to witness the beginning of the end." March of the Machine, Episode 3. Mother, Son, and Story. There is a story.
Many eons ago, there was a great wizard by the name of Urza. So wise was he that all the mages of the multiverse flocked to him for advice. So powerful was he that only his brother Mishra stood as a potential rival. But Mishra hated him bitterly, and soon a war began. The war spanned decades and took untold lives. Worse, it allowed evil without compare to blossom. An awful affliction spread through Mishra's armies, a black oil that changed everything in its path.
Tamio knows this story. This is the only way it starts. There is more, much, much more. Years ago she memorized every word. Afterward, just as Urza's metal heir had set himself upon the task of creating a plane, she'd set herself the task of recording it. Like the oil, she'd found the story had seeped into her mind, begun to change it into something she did not like, something dangerous. She sealed it away. What a foolish thing to have done. Hovering over the neon skies of Tawashi, she holds the scroll in hand. Oil seeps from her fingers onto the parchment. Before long, it will be impossible to read any of the characters, but that is no worry for someone like her, someone who knows these stories better than she knows her own. A Phyrexian centurion bashes in the roof of a building. People scatter from it like ants. No, not like ants whose carapaces lend them strength, who act as one in all things. People could never be so reliable when trapped by flesh and mortal fear. No, as they pour out from the building screaming, it is only the visceral that drives them, the corporeal, the falsest parts of their existence. There is an iron ring binding the scroll. Tamio slips it off. It plummets through the air, landing like so many other hunks of metal upon someone's unsuspecting crown. The story continues.
The wizard Urza creates an heir from pure, unvarnished metal. He names him Karn. The same spark of creation that birthed him burns brightly in his breast. Karn, too, must create. As a sculptor chipping at marble, he shapes his world. When it is done, the creatures named and granted boons, the climate carefully crafted, the earth shaped and polished, he appoints his own successor, Memnarch, to oversee it.
The spirits of Tawashi do not take kindly to her intrusion, nor the intrusion of her fellows. Bows bend, steam sears sinew, leaves slice like razor blades. Other stories serve to protect her, lesser stories, stories without purpose, stories that do not extol the glories and virtues she now sees so clearly. Every history, every tale, every fable that exists is either for unity or against it. She can shed those histories that no longer matter. This one does. She must bring it to its conclusion. As her eyes scan the scroll, the characters light up, even those now consumed with black oil. Each syllable she reads booms and reverberates, shaking the skyscrapers of Tawashi. Trains careen off their crumbling tracks and dive to the ground. The earth tears itself apart, opening crevices in the city that has space only for itself. Rivers pour in, taking boats and fishers along with them. Streaks of black color the water. Phyrexian symbols etch themselves onto the papers hanging on the buildings yet standing. It won't be long now. The story continues.
Memnarch, the heir's heir, is a copy of a copy, a faded image of Urza himself. It longs for the power its grandfather wielded as easily as a poet wields a brush. It longs for its parents' ability to create. It longs to see more. Over years, it plucks life from this plane,
and that settling them all within this garden, waiting for the flowers to come. And they do, but they aren't the flowers Memnarch expects. These bloom in black oil. Their choking roots wrap around that which is alive and whole. Soon the whole garden drowns beneath the oil. Their heir returns to discover his home has been torn asunder. There is more to the story. There are the people driven from their home and trampled underfoot, their souls shucked from their bodies altered beyond any recognition. A queen rising from among the muck to rule her people, a glorious, unending oneness, a life without war or conflict. The heir looks on all this with horror. When Tamia wrote the story, she feared all of this. She didn't understand the peace that came with being part of a greater family. This is not the way she'd tell this story now, but it is almost done, and she will continue telling it. Boseiju, the tree that once held this plane together, bursts apart. Like wine spilling from a cask, oil runs from between the splinters, dripping onto the thirsty earth. An unholy screech pierces the ears of all who will listen. Kami torn from their home, scatter out of the district. Some find their ends at the tip of a lance. Some find them torn apart by completed fissures joined with their catches. But the result is always the same. The Kami dissolve into a fine mist. Tendrils of smoke rise from the blackening soil, from the bridges dissolving into nothing, until the whole district is swallowed by the fog of dead Kami. There is a distant part within her that is screaming at the sight of all this, a small voice ringing in her ear, a tingling at her fingertips, but she cannot say that she is afraid. This is what is right for Kamigawa. After centuries of war, have they not earned peace? Is this not simply another step to become whole? The scroll itself becomes oil in Tamio's hands, dripping between her fingers. This is how the story ends, and how it has always ended, with Phyrexia's victory. A scab turns into a scar when you pick at it too much. A wound scars when it doesn't receive proper care. Kamigawa's bleeding. Ravnica is too. But Ravnica's got plenty of walkers to keep it safe. That's Teo's whole thing to start, and Ral's been dreaming up countermeasures for a while now. Said he had a hunch something big was coming. They can handle things there for a while, at least. Kaya and Vraska were supposed to hold Ravnica down while Jace coordinated with the other planes. That wasn't going to happen now. They'd manage without them. Kaido asked for help, staunching the bleeding on Kamigawa, and after what they'd been through, helping is the least she can do, even if she's got her own wounds to worry about. Kaya's not sure how long hers will hang around. Are these the sorts of memories that change who you are in the afterlife? If so, she's hopelessly lost. Seeing New Phyrexia was bad enough, but being in the middle of an invasion, watching New Phyrexia tear a plane limb from limb, the only way to keep from hurting is to let herself go numb in the sights. There's too much going on to save everyone. The ground rattles with the cratering footfalls of centurions. Snarling machine hounds roam the streets, some with people caught inside their lattice of bone. Centuries of history evaporate in an instant. Hundreds of potential futures are snuffed out all at once. There's no time for thinking about it. No time for bitterness over how this all happened, or why she's the one who must pull the Gatewatch together. No time for wondering what might go wrong. People are falling. No time to reconcile with the way her stomach twists after a planeswalk either. There's only moving, only doing. She must act. Kaya runs. One leap takes her onto a balcony as it splits off. Another sees her landing on the teetering floor beyond. Horror sets in a second later. The houseplants, scattered clothing, and ruined kitchen give breath to her worst fears. This was a residential building. Hopefully most of the inhabitants escaped. A half-finished bowl of noodles at least says the people in this unit did. But there are others, aren't there? A scream catches her ear, muffled by the ongoing chaos. Kaya phases through the wall, within its knickknacks and mementos, trying not to think about how all those things will be lost after today. A young boy and his dog quiver in the corner on the other side. Fallen supports have trapped the two of them in place. There's space enough for the dog to squeeze through, but the boy would have far more trouble. Kaya can't leave them here. She doesn't have much of an exit plan, doesn't know how exactly they're all going to make it out, but she can figure that out along the way. After all, it can't be harder than figuring out what to do about this invasion. Phasing through the fallen supports is easy enough. Normally, phasing the boy out of his position would be hard, but it's easier when he wants out just as much as she wants to help him. She offers him a hand. When he takes it, she pulls him through the fallen beam. The boy grins, and the dog squeezes through after them.
How are we going down?
He asks. A fair question, given the sight in front of him. The whole side of the building's been torn off. Tawashi looms, or what remains of it. Floors and furniture tumble to the ground, and as smoke rises from the earth, an acrid, oily smoke that Kaya doesn't want to think about too closely. The streets are packed with those fighting against the invasion, and those furthering it. Black oil seeps from the mouths and eyes of the attackers, and foul Phyrexian symbols glow on every surface. Worse, every few minutes a thundering boom shakes the plain, once more heralding the attack of Norn's skeletal, glowing branches. If Kaya was a kid watching all this, she'd ask the same question. But she's an adult now. Her job is to find answers where there are none. "We're gonna jump from one place to the next," she says. The boy tucks his dog inside of his shirt. "Are you good at jumping?"
"The best,"
says the boy. She hopes he is. She takes his hand, the two of them approaching the lip of the remaining floor. Up ahead, there's swinging remains of a balcony. If they can get onto that, then maybe they can shimmy down a rain pipe to safety. On three, she says. He nods. 1, 2, 3! The two of them jump at the same time, Kaya keeping the boy's hand in her own. But just as they should be landing, the balcony falls away. Kaya, the boy, and the dog plummet. You have a lot of thoughts when you think you're going to die. Fewer than when you're responsible for saving someone else. Kaya thinks fast. She might be able to save the boy if she can slow down their flight. That's going to be the priority. As he starts to scream, she clutches him to her chest. She closes her eyes. Impact never comes. An unseen force pushes back up against them, slowing their fall. Seconds before they hit the ground, they instead hover above it. Whatever's gripping them can't hold much longer. The two of them are trembling in its hold. A Phyrexian? Try to be less reckless next time. Kaido. Kaya opens her eyes to see him. His telekinesis is barely holding them up. Sweat beads on his forehead. Handling a human-sized object, let alone 3, must be pushing his powers to their limit. Blood, oil, and dirt are spattered across his slick armor. He gives her a nod. The boy acts first, hopping out into the ground. A woman nearby shouts for him. He runs without a second look back. A woof from his shirt tells her the dog's okay too. Kaya gets up. She flicks the tip of her nose with her thumb. "Thanks," she says. "Would have been lost without you." He lets that stand without correction, which she supposes is fair enough. "We have to move fast. The Boseiju district is their prime target. The whole thing. The tree. Kaido trails off, but Kaya can find her own answers. The tree over Tawashi is rent asunder. A foul waterfall pours from its body. That's awful, Kaya says. It is, Kaido nods. And worse, Tamio did it. Open to scroll. You can see her. Kaido points towards Tamio, floating high above the city, near Boseiju's weeping boughs. She's still reading from them. If no one takes her out, this is only going to get worse. Hells, they're talking about taking out friends now. Not that Kaya's any stranger to assassination, but there's something different about this. Tamio, of all people. We've both got skills for this. Should I do it, or do you want to handle her? It's personal, Kaido says with a nod. The Kami are going to want to fight this as much as we do. The ones who can fight. See if you can convince them to come. Speaking of help, where's the Wanderer? Kaya didn't mean it as a jab, but Kaido seemed to take it as one. The corner of his lip twitches. She's coming, Kaido says. You mean she isn't here? She'll be here, he says. Just have a little faith. All around them, Kamigawa is crumbling. He says have faith. It's like a bad joke, isn't it? Or scab they keep picking at. Tamio floats above them, or something that once was Tamio. She doesn't look down on them, doesn't seem to move, doesn't seem to care about what she's doing. Nothing could be further from the woman Kaito met in Otawara. He sizes up the oil-slick bark of the tree. No matter what he thought of her before, this is about more than just him. Kaido sets his foot against the bark. He gets about 3 steps up before someone calls to him. Are you going up there to fight her? The voice is small and timid. As much as he'd like to ignore it, he knows he can't. Besides, if there's a kid hanging around this place, they need to scatter, and fast. I am. You should get going. I can't, says the voice. When he looks down, he catches sight of the kid. A little Nezumi in motley metal armor and a homemade helmet that obscures his face. He must have cobbled it together out of scraps. Wait a second. That's my mom up there. Nashi? He asks. Sure enough, he nods. Kaido lets himself down from the tree. You don't want to be here, he says. Things are going to get bad. But you're not going to hurt her, are you? Nashi asks, fussing his hands. She looks different, but that's still her. I think she's forgotten herself. I thought maybe if I talked to her. Kaido runs a hand through his hair. I don't think it's that simple. You have to let me try, Nashi says. He draws himself up to his full height, which isn't very tall. I came all the way out here to help when I heard things were getting bad. Mom said that's what heroes do. If you can bring me up somewhere she can see me, then I'm sure she'll listen. No matter who she is, she'll always love me. She promised. Kaido's chest goes tight. He doesn't want to do this. But what if it was Aiko up there? Kaido doesn't want to think about the possibility, yet he knows he'd do anything he could to get her back. Even if getting her back didn't seem like an option, Tamio ended up this way because of him. The least he can do is try this plan. Alright, Kaido says. How's your climbing? Okay, Nashi says. Not good enough when there's all this stuff on the tree. It didn't seem like I should touch it. You shouldn't, Kaido says. He takes a repulsor from his belt. Nashi couldn't weigh much, right? Kaido clips it to Nashi's sash and turns it on. A soft hum radiates as he starts to float. Walk in the direction you want to go. It's a little slow, but you'll be able to follow along. If you hit the button one more time, it'll shield you. Don't hit it after that unless you want to drop. Nashi nods. Kaido swallows, shaking away the sense of dread. If worst came to worst, he'd tell Nashi to leave. But maybe he's right. Maybe there is a way to break through all this. Stranger things have happened. They need to try. Boseiju doesn't make itself easy to climb. Between the torrents of oil raining down above them and the chaos beneath, there isn't much in the way of mercy. Normally, there were branches lower to the ground upon which some of the kami dwelled, but all those have split apart. The first branch that suits them is far higher up, and only half stable at that. The air is cold and thin when they at last alight upon it. If it weren't for his training, Kaito would be dizzy. Nashi isn't so lucky. When his paws meet the bark, he sways from one to the other, clutching at his stomach. Kaito sets a hand on his shoulder. He points ahead to where Tamio still hovers. Take a second if you need it, but she's there, hasn't noticed us either. Nashi takes 2 steadying breaths. Kaito breathes along with him. Sometimes it helps to have company when it comes to that sort of thing. Okay, I'm ready, Nashi says. Kaito hopes he is. Just in case things go wrong, he unsheathes his sword. I've got your back. Step by unsteady step, Nashi makes his way to the end of the branch. Kaito follows a pace or 2 behind. His heart hammers in his ears. Something in Tamio had to remain. Something in her would remember. Right? Mom? Tamio's head swivels all the way around her neck. The eyes that behold them are not the kind, inquisitive eyes that Kaito once knew. They're something else entirely. Rimmed with black, the tears on her cheeks a testament to what she's become. Tamio says nothing. Around her the scrolls swirl. The light catches the sharp edges of her claws. It's me, Nashi. You remember me, right? I don't think you want to do any of this. I think you've made a mistake. But I know someone's making you. I just want you to remember. Like in the stories about lost princes. Nashi trembles so hard that it is difficult for him to speak. Nashi, says Tamio, what are you doing here? Kaito reaches out to steady the small Nezumi. And it is then that the rest of Tamio's body snaps around to match her head. Then that face wrenches into a scowl. A shard of metal shoots towards them, flung from the orbit of scrolls floating around Tamio. It is only Kaito's time-honed instincts that save him. He deflects the shards with telekinesis the way he'd deflected all the stones his instructors flung at him. The clang of metal rings in his ears. I want nothing more than for you to join me, Nashi, says Tamio. Her voice rings wrong to Kaito, like a twisted cicada's cry. You're only afraid because you don't understand. There's nothing to fear. In the light of New Phyrexia, all are one. Kaito steps in front of Nashi. Go back toward the tree. I can't leave her. This isn't your mother, Kaito snaps. Now go. Kaito gives Nashi a push further back. If things are going to get violent, there's no way he wants Nashi to see it. No sooner than Kaito shoves Nashi away than does Tamio descend on him. Tamio was someone who did what she could to support others. A storyteller, an investigator, a woman devoted to her family. But now? Phyrexia changed her. Warped that curious storyteller into a cruel hierophant. There was nothing behind those oil-weeping eyes. Tamio's claws sliced through the air, followed by weaponized scrolls that grab at Kaito's neck and arms, threatening to bind and overwhelm him. Kaito slices through the paper while keeping the metal at bay, but his footing on this slick branch is treacherous. He slips. Tamio's claws skitter and spark off of Kaito's armor before he manages to recover. The slightest skid of his feet, and those claws will find a home across his neck. He manages to recover his balance with only a tear across his armor to show for it. Kaito holds out his sword before him. Tamio stares back at him, unblinking. This is a pointless fight. Maybe for you, Kaito says. There's no way you're going to win this. Without even a gesture, Tamio sends 5 more shards flying toward him. Kaito blocks 4. The 5th slices him across his cheek. I pity you, Tamio says.
Fighting against peace to maintain your loneliness. You stand in the way of your own enlightenment. Like a child, you fight against the parents who only wish to welcome you.
Hearing her like this tears him up. Kaido hopes Nashi can't hear this. And he hopes too that Nashi isn't watching when he throws his weight into a lunge. Tamio sways back into counters. A scroll wraps around his leg. He tries to shift his weight and cut himself loose. Tamio pulls. Kaido flips feet overhead before he knows what's happened, dangling far above Tawashi. The smoke of the burning city stings at his eyes. Somehow he keeps hold of his sword.
I'm giving you one final opportunity to surrender, Kaito. Phyrexia can give you the life you've always wanted. Come home and let me welcome my family.
Blood's rushing to his head. Think, if he cuts himself down, he's going to fall. Maybe he'll be able to catch himself on something. Maybe not, but he doesn't have many better options. I like my life the way it is, he says. Kaido makes the cut. He falls. Impact never comes. Instead, he feels something cool and soft beneath him. Something familiar.
We're up to 3 if you're keeping count.
That voice. A smirk comes to him before his eyes are open. It's the Emperor. She lands atop the branch in a hush of cloth. Her sword held out at her side, which means she must have landed on Kyodai, the guardian spirit of Kamigawa, whose soul is bonded to the Emperor.
Call it even with me.
Kaya's voice tells Kaido he isn't alone. She's right next to him, the two of them riding together.
For now, Kaido says, I told you she'd be here.
Kyodai swoops back up towards Tamio. They're level with the branch now. His eyes are trained on the Emperor as she confronts Tamio. Each step is cautious and graceful. The slickness that troubled Kaido isn't a concern for the Emperor. What jocularity there was in her initial greeting is gone when she addresses the monstrosity before her.
Is this truly the place for a fight, Tamio?
The Emperor asks.
You should be asking yourself that,
Tamio responds. A flurry of shards fly out towards her, each split in two by a single cut of the Emperor's blade. Tamio backs away with each step the Emperor takes towards her, stopping right beside a frightened Nashi. Tamio's hand settles on Nashi's head. Kaido's stomach twists. He wonders if he should look away. Instead, he finds the strength to call out, "Nashi, turn around!" Tamio reaches for a scroll at her waist, one bound with an iron band. She slips the band free with a finger. The silken paper unfurls. "Kyodai!" the Emperor shouts. The great kami beneath them flies to her side. The Emperor holds her sword towards her companion and Kyodai breathes upon it. Shining white lines the blade. Characters float in the air around her. Kyodai's power flows through the Emperor. Tamio's mouth begins to move. Nashi, at last, comprehending what is about to happen, turns away. A flash of white light, the sound of a blade unsheathing, the whistle of a distant gale. Tamio falls. Kaido is on his feet in an instant. Nashi is all alone up there now. He's going to need company. By the time Kaido closes the distance, the Wanderer is there to meet them. Kaido hugs Nashi tight.
"That wasn't her!" Nashi repeats. "That wasn't... Why was she like that? Why didn't she..."
There aren't any easy answers. Certainly none Kaido can summon. A stone in his throat keeps him from speaking. The Emperor bows her head with grief.
"Your mother will live on in your memory and the stories you tell of her."
It is wise counsel, but not necessarily comforting to someone in the thick of pain. Nashi's sobs only get louder. Kaido can't blame him. Another hand alights on his shoulder. Oddly light and cold, Kaya never seemed the type for tearful reunions, but maybe after what they saw on New Phyrexia, she's singing a different tune. Any comfort is welcome now. Even Kyodai wraps around them all. For a moment, it feels as if they're trying to hold the plane together. Perhaps in the case of this one young boy, they are. Peace lasts until they hear Nashi's mother calling for him. Tamiyo's voice does not drift up from the pile of metal the Emperor struck down, but from right among them. This wasn't the cold Phyrexian whisper, but warm, familiar tones of her old self. Nashi, I'm sorry. Kaido shields Nashi with his body. Before them is a strange being. Densely packed floating characters form a woman's silhouette. They glow and dim as if breathing. When they next hear Tamiyo's voice, a light at the center glows even brighter. Characters wink in and out of existence and change as he studies them. Tawashi's projected neons can achieve all sorts of trickery, but this is something different. The way it's moving feels too intentional to be random, too imperfect to be artificial. The light glowing within reminds him more of a kami than any of Tawashi's technical wonders. I understand you might be wary of me, but I mean you no harm, Tamiyo says. What are you? Kaido asks. Not a ghost, that's for sure, Kaya calls. She's at the edge of the branch. What do you want? The silhouette turns towards each of them, then nods. I am what remains of Tamiyo, her story unending. You may think of me as her memory. Many years ago, she created me in anticipation of her death, and sealed me away within a scroll until I was needed, bound with an iron ring. Tamiyo's memory, her story, pauses. I had hoped I might never be. How do we know you aren't? Kaido starts. But Nashi is already breaking away from him, towards the odd conglomeration of characters. When he meets them, they swarm, settling into his arms. Kaido moves towards the boy, but the Emperor gestures for him to stop. The Emperor turns away, towards the body, towards Kamigawa, towards the ruin of the night. She's telling the truth! How do you know? Kaido asks. How do you know this isn't another Phyrexian scheme? Were you watching closely? Before I struck, Tamiyo mouthed something. I saw that, but she could have been doing anything. I thought she was preparing a curse. She wasn't, the Wanderer says. All of these shards she threw at me went too wide to do any damage. Didn't you notice? She set a hand on one of the Kyodai's many masks, and the kami touches her in turn. A hard-won moment of tenderness on a battlefield like this. Tamiyo was making a request, the only way she could. Kaido looks back over his shoulder. Nashi is still surrounded by the characters, by the story unending. It isn't a clean victory, or even a very good one. Kaido looks out over the burning city below Boseju's wounded canopy. So many are dead, so many are dying, so many more that will die. In the distance, he sees shapes moving through the strange smoke, giant mechs lumbering towards the impact barb, Imperial forces gathering to counter the Phyrexian assault. How much can they do? How much can they save? Tamiyo fell, but Nashi lived. Considering the work left to do, he'll take it. There is a story.
Once upon a time, there was a great evil, one that threatened to swallow the planes of the multiverse whole. Feeling and uncaring, it infected the hearts of those it encountered. There was someone who fought against it. There was a protector in white.
March of the Machine, Episode 4, Beneath Eyes Unblinking. To battle and bravery born, to battle and bravery Tyvar Kell returns, with boasts upon his lips and black tidings in his heart. Skemfar welcomes its wayward son with open arms. After the ozone-laden atmosphere of New Phyrexia and the acrid safe-house swamp in Dominaria, it is a welcome thing to breathe good forest air into his lungs. But the moment he arrives, he knows he is too late. It is not to welcoming cheers he returns, but to the clatter of swords against metal, the howl of arrows in flight, and the screams of the pierced. In the distance, a sanguine Ophidian, the size of a mountain, strangles the world tree. White armor, glacier thick, protects it. Pods fall, the shed scales of this foul serpent, and the ground trembles with every arrival, each one met with the hammer of war. War drums beat in time with his own wild heart as he pushes his way into the melee. Glory drives his limbs, he ducks the scythe-like limb of an enemy, changes his own arm to metal, drives it through the thing's head. An instant later, he's swaying out of the way of an axe as it takes out another. A cheer ringing out behind him gladdens his heart. The end of days have come to Kaldheim, and the elves of Skemfar meet it head on. Tyvar sees his brother fighting alongside his people, surrounded by skalds and banners. "Here for the dregs!" Harald calls to him. "There'll be plenty!" "And more coming!" Tyvar says. Something that was once a giant hurls a boulder towards them. The others scatter, but Tyvar plants his feet. From the earth he draws his strength, and with a single blow shatters the rock. He grins. "You must have been struggling before I returned." Harold shakes his head. "Enough of that! Do you know of anything that can help us? Who are these creatures?" "Phyrexians," Tyvar answers. A scream takes his attention. One of the elves has found himself caught in the belly of a giant skeletal wolf. Tyvar winces. "See there! They'll bathe him in oil, and then he'll be more metal than elf. And after that, the changes start. Won't be long before he'd tear off his own father's skin." A dozen warriors meet the hound, 2 coming in on each side to flank. Hammers ring against steel. "They won't stop until everything in Kaldheim's like they are. I've been to their home, brother. It is lifeless, without song." He swallows. The next part isn't easy to say, yet it must be said. "This isn't an enemy the elves can vanquish alone." The cosmos itself reinforces his grim warning. The ground roars and shakes beneath their feet, white light leaking up from the opening crevices. Tyvar knocks against his brother. Harald steadies him, then points to the opening doom-scar. "It seems we won't be alone for long." Phyrexians and elves alike plummet into the hungry earth. Shifting light renders them silhouettes as the cosmos claims them. Unsated, the light creeps higher and higher still, until at last torrents of water emerge. Tyvar scrambles, sinking into the ground, creating a platform for him and his people. His muscles strain under the force of his magic, shifting between rock and water, rock and water. When he sees the first of the longboats cresting the water, Tyvar knows he's going to be at this for a while. Maybe longer than he can manage. If he fails, the elves will be washed away as surely as the Phyrexians. The lives of his people are in his hands. He can't fail. Tyvar Kell bellows a war cry. As his body battles the tides and the rock, he feels alive. And while he's doing the simple thing, his brother handles what's more complicated. Omen seekers aboard the ship call out to the stranded elves, their captain leading. "It is the end of all things! Will the elves come and join the fight?" "The elves will lead it," is Harold's proud answer. "On to the ships!" Tyvar's shoulders tremble with effort, and yet he holds fast to the earth. Each pair of fleeing feet shrinks the platform, smaller and smaller, until only he and Harold remain on the rock. He can hardly believe what he sees when he looks at the ships. Dwarves and humans, ghostly fallen heroes, undead warriors, Carfell barbarians, fire giants wading through the seas, trolls beating war drums. Has everyone on Kaldheim banded together? Tyvar can't recall seeing so many different faces in one place outside a battlefield. New Phyrexia planted the seed of doubt and fear deep within him. The oil and the changing of his newfound comrades nurtured it. But this true unity? This is an axe. Harold climbs onto the ship first. He stretches out a hand towards Tyvar, who instead leaps onto the longship of his own accord. Beneath them, the platform crumbles away into Skemfar's new river. "Warriors!" Harold calls. The sigils and guides along the side of the ship begin to glow. "Our grudges are ancient. A single battle shall not wipe clean the slate of old wrongs. When the morrow comes, all of us will once more be enemies." Tyvar's heart thrums in time with the beating drums, the sounding horns. Ships pick up speed. When Harold spoke, even his most hated enemies waited to hear what he had to say. He does not know where they are going, but he knows that wherever they land, glory awaits. White swallows them. For an instant, they enter the cosmos, dazzling and infinite. Unearthly beasts lope alongside the boat. Wolves, ravens, bears, and even a squirrel. "But that is only if we live to greet the morrow, my brothers and sisters in arms. Today, the Valkyries will have their choice of heroes. Today is a day the Skalds shall sing of for centuries. Will your descendants name you a hero or a coward?" Light once more. Tyvar doesn't shut his eyes, no matter how the pattern sears at his irises. When at last the light recedes, they find themselves above a churning ocean. Somehow they're airborne. He leaves no time to question it, only lets it thrill his blood. Valkyries fly alongside them towards the sharp barbs of the invasion tree, yet to find their home. Divine arrows streak light across the reddening sky. The world tree looms, its foul mirror descending down, down, down. From here he can count every bump of its spine, every pod nestled within. There must be thousands, tens of thousands maybe, each with their own complement of soldiers, and each of those soldiers a fearsome foe. This was an enemy almost unstoppable. Worse, those who died in defense of Kaldheim would rise, corrupted, to fight for the invaders who sought to destroy the land they once called home. The odds, he knows, are not good. "If Kaldheim survives, let it survive because we fought. If it dies, let it die a warrior's death, axe in hand, a boast on its lips, and mead in its belly." Beneath them the water bubbles. Just as the longboats erupt in a warrior's song, the seas so too erupt. The tattoos on Tyvar's shoulder tingle. All elves grew in the shadow of coma, ever changing, ever growing, quick as lightning and wily besides. Is there any better creature to emulate than a serpent? But that is not true of the serpent he sees now, the creature that rises from the depths of the sea. Sleek scales of metal, sharp bone along the ridges of its mouth, porcelain plating in place of its eyes. Whatever this creature once was, it is now unmistakably one of Elesh Norn's creations. Already, the eyeless monstrosity has snapped a longship between its jaws. Wood groans and warriors cry, tumbling great distances to their deaths. From others, a hail of arrows, stones, thrown axes, whatever they might get a hold of. All bounce off of the creature's strange carapace. Tyvar takes a step onto the boat's railing. In the flickering light of what might be Kaldheim's last war, The edge of his blade gleams bright. Below him, the mouth of the serpent, within it, New Phyrexia, and all his fears made manifest. He doesn't like being afraid. With the seething song of battle at his back and a cry from his chest, Tyvar leaps from the ship. However the story of this day ends, the saga will tell he was no coward. Pia Nalaar has spent the last 10 years of her life fighting for a better Kaladesh. Most of that work's been undone in a day. No, the truth is it's been a week, at least. Saheeli warned her then that something like this might happen, that something was going to happen. The clouds held proof, she'd said. In place of the swirls that so often dominated the skies of Kaladesh, she'd shown Pia the new shape that had come to dominate them. "We have to be ready for an invasion," Saheeli said. "Chandra and the others have a handle on it." She was so confident, so certain. She didn't want to believe that it could be otherwise. After all that had happened, after all the struggles and wars, the Gatewatch must understand what needs doing. They must be able to handle it. Then, one morning, Pia spilled ink on her desk. When she grabbed a cloth to clean up the mess, the symbol, like an unblinking eye, stared back up at her in vicious black. The memory was bad enough, but after the first spill, she saw it everywhere she looked. In scrolls curled on a shelf, in a plate of noodles that she had not the stomach to finish, in trees and currents of water. Every day she awoke hoping that they'd fade, that she'd not seen them, that Chandra would stroll back into her home for their monthly tea appointment with another story about how they'd snapped victory from the jaws of defeat. But by the third day, she knew she had to act. She and Saheeli addressed the consulate, but how could they convey the severity of what they knew? After Ghirapur had won its own freedom and safety, addressing this threat would stoke fear within the populace, and how could they be certain it was coming? The House of Knowledge had no records of any Phyrexians, yet Saheeli and Pia were not raving madwomen. A fact the consulate knew well. If Pia allocated the resources to fight, then fight they would, even if some of them had no heart in it. On the fourth day, the sky darkened to a deep, rusty red. For the past 3 days, Saheeli had been working on something she'd called Operation Golden Scales, something she said would keep the streets safe. Most citizens in Ghirapur had been evacuated, leaving only essential personnel behind. Skyships armed themselves with powerful experimental weaponry. Ghirapur's workshops and factories had never worked so hard in such a short time, but it was for the best. After all, if the enemy breached the Aetherflux reservoir, there would no longer be a Ghirapur to defend. So the artisans hadn't slept, and Pia hadn't either. She'd fallen asleep in the entryway of her own home. Getting to bed was just too much effort. When at last the portals overhead opened, when the great spines of invasion descended from the holes they tore in reality, when the aether around them began to crackle dangerously against her skin, all of this was like letting out a breath. It was here. They were here. The time for preparation was long behind them. All they could do was hope that it had been enough. Ghirapur's streets are clear, or as clear as they're ever going to get, as Pia leaves her home. 3 buildings away, a pod obliterates a building's facade. Shattered glass, distant screams, weapons firing. The sounds are close and yet altogether different from the sounds of revolution. There is no chanting here. There are no throaty slogans, no proud horns or resounding drums. Only fear and desperation. Skyships overhead fire their cannons at the invading branches, and explosions paint the red sky gold. Shards of porcelain rain down upon the streets. She seeks cover beneath the statue's outstretched arms, only to watch as the shards rend furrows down its sides. Pia looks back up at the sky, at the ship that so readily advanced against the questing branch. She met its captain 2 days ago. He swore that he'd do everything in his power to keep Girapur safe. 1,500 flights, he said, with no major losses to speak of. She watched as the branch wraps around the ship, watches as its windows shatter as easily as those down the street, watches the oil slick its surface. Pia closes her eyes. Her chest aches. 1,000 thoughts fight to slip into her mind, but she walls them away. There's a rendezvous with Saheeli to get to. Speaking of, looks like her operation's off to a good start. Deployment chambers spring up from hatches all along the street, and from those chambers emerge the fruits of Operation Golden Skies. Saheeli must have taken inspiration from some fantastic kind of lizard. The one lumbering in front of Pia is as big as the house that crumpled moments ago. The shining teeth along its jaws are each the size of Pia's forearm. When it stomps its feet, the stones beneath crack, and it is only one of many. All along the streets, other bronze attack lizards spring up from the earth. Some are the size of small dogs, some take to the skies like thopters, but all roar their defiance at the coming Phyrexians. And there are Phyrexians to deal with, even if the sight of these things is almost enough to distract Pia. From the broken house pour dozens of spindly porcelain soldiers, some of whom carry cages as big as they are. The two forces are about to clash. Pia doesn't want to be in the middle of it. She ducks under the bronze lizard's feet in time for a familiar face to pop up behind the Phyrexians. A cloud of thopters fly from Saheeli's cruiser. While the lizards descend upon the soldiers, the thopters conceal Pia's escape. "Get in!" Saheeli shouts, and she's right to hurry. The soldiers don't take their duties lightly. Within minutes, they've swarmed the largest of the lizards and taken it down. Oil seeps from its split mouths. It won't be long before the lizard rises against them, too. Pia hops into the car. Saheeli's foot must be as leaden as the metal she's so fond of. The two of them jerk backwards against the seat as the speed catches up to them. Wind whistles in Pia's ears, but they have to talk. "The flagship's down!" "I know," Saheeli answers. An explosion to their right sends them swerving. Saheeli only barely manages to keep them from flipping. "The smaller ships are doing what they can. The tendrils can't grasp them quickly enough to stop them. Of course, their firepower is lacking in comparison." Pia ducks as Saheeli takes them between the legs of a massive Phyrexianized lizard construct. Metal scrapes against metal. The cruiser's sides dent and distort despite Saheeli's best efforts. Oil drips onto the trunk's lid. Pia tries not to wonder how long it'll be before the cruiser is corrupted too. "Do you know what the situation is at the Aetherflux reservoir?" Pia asks. "We think the Phyrexians might understand its importance, or else feel a pull towards the aether stored there," Saheeli answers. "If you'll notice, they're all heading straight for it." They turn a corner, and Pia sees the guards. Her stomach wrenches at the sight. Like a sinister parody of Saheeli's design aesthetics, they are filigreed in white porcelain, half metal and half flesh. One of the men sports a large hole in the center of his head, one that Pia can see clear through. Only his ears, scalp, and chin remain. It looks as if he is a needle meant to be threaded, and that the razors his arms have become only affirm the notion. Despite his hideous alteration, his chest rises and falls with unseen breath. His head, such as it is, turns towards the reservoir. Pia covers her mouth. "We can't do anything to save them," Saheeli says. "There has to be something." "There might be, but whatever it is will surely take study, experimentation, iteration. Once the city's secure, we can consider what shape that might take, but not now." Pia presses her eyes shut as the cruiser shoots over the newly converted Phyrexians. There are more of them to see when she opens her eyes again. Has she been ignoring them before now? There are so many, in so many different forms. Some that are the same porcelain plating motif as the tendrils overhead, some that have their organs replaced with glowing orange flame. She sees a street dog that has grown quills and tendrils twice its size, It'd be comical if the plane wasn't falling apart around her. Have you heard from the others? She asks before she can stop herself. Saheeli's eyes don't leave the reservoir far ahead of them. I have. The last time they saw Chandra, she was alright. Pia's been around politicians long enough to know that she isn't getting the whole story. And when was that? Recently. Very recently, Saheeli answers. She looks over her shoulders. This might not be the best time. There isn't a good time when it comes to bad news. There are better times than this. Pia frowns. Please, just tell me what's going on. Saheeli glances around. Renegade Prime, long time no see. Pia turns. Along with the sprightly voice comes the rumble of an engine. Hanging over the side of a skimmer above them is one of her old Renegade contacts, Badgie. Need any help down there? We can use all the help we can get, she says. We're headed to the reservoir. Come on in then, calls the pilot. You'll get there faster in this, and we've got better firepower, too. Saheeli looks up. He's not joking. Those weapons aren't legal. The Renegades were always great at securing contraband. Pia stands in the passenger seat of the cruiser, one hand on the seat and the other on the door. Saheeli doesn't slow down, not even when Pia offers her a hand. There's only room for one more in that skimmer, Saheeli says. When one of the geniuses of Kaladesh tells you what she wants to do, it behooves you to listen. Besides, when it comes to revolution and crises, you must be able to improvise. Right, Pia says. We'll cover you. As Badgie swoops lower, he reaches out for Pia. The skimmer's not the most solid thing in the world, not by a long shot. Now that they're in it, she wonders how it's flying at all. Nuts and bolts rattle around them, and the seat's little more than a strip of leather on hard, hastily shaped metal. The back seat's so narrow that the sides bite against her shoulders. Badgie angles the craft up, climbing higher. Girapur vanishing below the clouds as they rise into the sky. He flips a switch on his console, and a glass dome slides over the open cockpit. Helmet's under your seat, Badgie says. Pia pulls the helmet on. She can't help but notice the chips and scrapes on the cockpit glass. Is this thing secure? She asks. It'll hold, Badgie says. I put it together myself, used only the finest scrap, straight from... Whatever he meant to say is lost in a gurgle when a javelin punches through the window and impales him through the chest to his seat. Blood-soaked tips stopping only a hair's breadth from Pia. Swooping through the air above them is something that might once have been a bird. Now it fights for Phyrexia. Realization sets in. That's no javelin, it's a quill. Alarms howl, drowned out by the air screaming in through the hole in the ship's cockpit. Slowly it begins to tip to the side, and then twist nose first, plummeting towards the ground. Pia's stomach lurches at the shift in momentum, the nauseating weightlessness. Without thinking, she squeezes into the pilot's seat, wedging the quill free from the leather. Badgie's body has her half pinned. There's no room to navigate. The console's an incomprehensible hodgepodge of welded together parts. There are 2 Phyrexian birds on her flanks and more ships all around. This isn't good. And that's before factoring in that Pia Nalar has never even flown one of these things before. But she isn't about to give up here, not when it comes to keeping Kaladesh safe, and not when it comes to her daughter. Chandra's going to come to tea next month. Pia's going to be there to meet her, if she can just get through this. From the second Atraxa arrived, New Capenna drew its nails down her pristine carapace. A city built reaching ever upward, the atmosphere crackling with a disgusting energy, crawling with a horrible diversity of life. Everything about it is anathema to her, to Phyrexia. How fortunate that her orders are to scour it. But Phyrexia is not a beast that eats without thought. In all things there is the seed of greatness, no matter how base the material. To be Phyrexian is to allow yourself to grow, to change, to become something greater than you once were. The spire that so vexes can be stripped of its accoutrements and rendered anew. This is a place teeming with sin and filth, and Atraxa will be its savior. The work alone is enough to fill her with ecstasy. All along the rooftops, the organics take up arms. Their weapons will not serve them here. There are no dents in Phyrexia's armor, nor will climbing higher save them. A single thought from Atraxa summons swarms of flying servitors. Tiny though they may be, they are hungry beasts. Soon, those that climb are nothing more than bones falling to the earth. Those that take to the streets instead rely on their muscle and sinew to fight back. They are ignorant to the weaknesses of flesh. The war engines crash through the storefront after storefront to fulfill their will. As they reach the street, they unleash clouds of caustic gas. Flesh melts from bone. "Harvest them!" One glorious thought echoed in 1,000 minds. They take no prisoners here on New Capenna. There are no cages for the fleshlings. What the engines cannot melt with their gases is shoveled back inside of them by servitors. Only these parts will remain. "Harvest them!" How loudly the words ring in her mind. The organics try to fool the Phyrexians, disappearing into the dark and reappearing behind them, but it is no use. Nothing is going to prevent what is to come, neither will the spells hurled in desperation or the blades driven between the ribs of centurions. Phyrexia can never be defeated, but flesh will always yield in the end. Norn's orders were clear. Everything that draws wretched breath on this plane must be harvested for parts, and so they will be. But Atraxa sees a use for them before tearing them asunder. After all, somewhere within this monstrosity of a plane, there are the remains of her predecessors. Finding them is part of her assignment here. The minds of the newcomers open readily to her. Maestros, they call themselves. The thrill of their new bodies ripples through the entirety of the invading force, lending them strength against those who foolishly resist. Yet this is not the answer she seeks, not the answer Phyrexia needs. Deeper into their minds she ventures. Within them, Atraxa finds something curious, beautiful. Over and over, that word, that idea, it never comes alone, always with images or sounds or tastes, paint on canvas, stone shaped by a studious hand, flowers opening in the night, a keening creak from a wooden instrument. These things, she surmises, must be beautiful. And what is beautiful must be important. Often it is the first thought they have when they look on their new forms, the first word that pops into their minds. But what is that? Why are they so preoccupied with it? The strength of their convictions spread through the invading forces, each mind amplifying the last. The word rings within Atraxa's skull until she can no longer escape it. Norn warned her about this. She said there was something about this place that would try to infect her, something that her previous life might lend her resistance against. There are distant memories in her mind of beauty, of a pale imitation of completion she once reveled in. This is the face and name of her enemy, and those who spent so long worshipping this false divinity must know where it lives. Searching their minds provides another answer. Museum. The images that come along are clear enough. Surveying the city, she sees it not far from one of the conversion pods. A squat building festooned in marble, shaped this way and that. She looks at it and wonders if it is beautiful. Those who were once maestros tell her that it is. The columns, the statues, the carefully curated ivy crawling upon its facade. How could she ever think it was anything but beautiful? The furor of their passion drives her on. Whatever it is they are hiding, she must be able to get a better idea of it there. As Phyrexia tears through the resistance, Atraxa lands upon the steps outside the building. The doors are too small for her. With a touch, she corrects their already apparent failures. This place, too, shall embrace Phyrexia. Inside, there are more incomprehensible works. Fleshy beings stare back from canvas or panels of wood, a testament to the frailty of natural materials. So great is the arrogance of these creatures that they have shaped stone and metal in their image. The wretched inversion rankles Atraxa. All of this does. Why would anyone bother with any of this? These paintings often portrayed only a single individual. Even those with groups do not portray any more than a dozen. Why extol the virtues of so few when it is by the hands of many that great work is done? And these statues, even more individual than the paintings. Her spear makes short work of them. The newly formed scream in the recesses of the Phyrexian mind, but only for a moment. That part of them is dying and understands that this is for the best. All will be one. These works no longer matter. And yet something deep within that same mind tells her that she must keep going, that there is something here. At the very least, she can see to the destruction of the heresy around her. Deeper within, there are more atrocities. Worse, if it can be believed. Here the works no longer represent anything at all. They are sharp, geometrical representations of organic creatures. Neither weapons nor bulwarks. She can imagine no purpose for them. These too she strikes down, her frustration growing. It is the last room which answers her questions. Here there are no strange objects. Here there is no paint. No mortal loudly announcing their own individual self. Instead, these shapes she sees are pale imitations of glory. A lopsided axe upon the wall, a mock warhound carapace upon a plinth, images that occlude the glory of completion. Norn told her Phyrexians had once been here, but this speaks to the cruelty organics think themselves above. Beautiful! That word again in her mind, that awful word, but there is nothing beautiful about any of this. Do these people worship failure? Do they look upon the bodies of those that came before and marvel at them? The memories of the maestros are a battering ram. Groups gathered around these remains, drinking and eating and chittering with their wet lips and glistening tongues. Can you imagine being that guy swinging that thing around?
I'll tell you something. I wish I could hire him to follow me around and just stand there, looking intimidating.
Say, how much do you think it's worth? I've got half a mind to buy it myself.
Come on, pal. There's no way you could afford it.
Her grip on her spear tightens. Wrong, wrong, wrong. This place. The Phyrexians who are too weak to see their missions through. The fleshlings who mock them. Beautiful. That awful word they have for this cannot mean anything other than wrongness. Atraxa will strike it down. All of it, everything that bears the name, must be destroyed. To allow it to exist only invites further mockery, and Phyrexia shall not be mocked. As Phyresis creeps over the building's facade, she obliterates everything within it. What purpose it will serve is not for her to decide. What is useful of them will linger, and what is not will be stripped away. Tail, claw, spear, and scream, her weapons are unerring and untiring. Scrap and rubble are all that remain when she is done. What inhabitants she encounters are smeared across the rocks. In their last moments, they might imagine that they are beautiful. But she never wants to hear the word again. If she could scour it from the mind of Phyrexia, she would. But that is a thing only the mother of machines may decree. Still, Elish Norn appointed her to lead these forces, which means she can strike down beauty here, if she pleases. Atraxan needs only think the order for it to go out. To her satisfaction, as she emerges from the museum, she hears weapons striking stone all around. The satisfaction does not last long. Across the courtyard there are angels staring at her, angels with faces of stone. It is not a conscious thing that happens next. It is not a thought she has, but an instinct. At once she realizes that the stone seraphs of the cathedral are indeed beautiful, and that she hates them more than she has ever hated anything, more than she knew it was possible to hate. The chorus of minds falls away to the resounding note of anger hammering through her being. In a blur of white, she strikes the heads from the statues. When they crumble to the ground, she does not stop attacking them, but continues, bringing her spear down over and over, again and again, heedless of the hazy energy that emerges from the rock. Though it sears her carapace and her sinews are alight with agony, she cannot bring herself to stop until nothing remains of the heads but a fine dust. Only then does she stop. Only then does she hear Phyrexia again.
There are fleshlings climbing the tower. What must be done with them?
One voice speaks, and another.
Harvest them, harvest them. But this vapor pains us, and we ache. Phyrexia does not ache. Harvest them.
Atraxa looks up at the headless figures. A deep calm comes over her. Beauty is dead, and she can turn her attentions once more to the font, to the beings on the outside of the towers, and what they might be planning. She leaves the platform. But the seraphs remain, watching her go, with their visitor hovering among them in a haze of color. They too speak among themselves.
"Why not stop her?"
asks the visitor.
"It is not yet time."
It does not feel like the right answer, but the visitor cannot disprove it.
"Have faith.
It's almost here. The end. You'll know what to do when we've gotten there." Thank you for watching the video, and an extra big thank you to the Patreon patrons and YouTube members that help make these videos possible. Hope you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.